Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are. My name is Fadi Manawi with Visa Place, and I'm here today with Lauren Cohen of eCouncil Global. And we are going to be speaking about E2 visas today and why it is probably a really good time to be applying for this if you're inclined to do so in the near future. Um, so we're going to be talking about our experience and what it's been like so far in 2021. And we're also going to be opening up the floor for questions, which I'm sure there's going to be some questions that come up.
Just one or
So,
two.
of course, thank you and welcome, Lauren.
Thanks.
Thanks for joining us.
Of course. Thanks, Fadi. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, we've done these before, and I mean, I think they're when I look back upon them, they're extremely helpful. They give a lot of sort of inside detail as to what we look for as professionals, and gives any prospective e-visa uh, applicant, sort of the know-how of how to navigate this. So, thanks again for joining us. Today's format is going to be, it's a little bit different. We are going to be talking about E2 visas and why they are a good visa for those wanting to take a proactive approach to living stateside. I don't know about you, Lauren, but over the past number of months, I've had many people that have reached out to me, and due to various lockdowns, it's particularly for Canadians.
For
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, and they're asking, I need to escape from this. What do I need to
Escape.
do
It's
to
true. If it
right?
was winter now, we'd even be doubly as busy.
Exactly. And, unless the individual has, some sort of a family-based application that's underlying, or an employment-based application, and even employment-based can be a little bit tricky waters to navigate.
Sure.
The investment-based option, and in particular the E2 visa, could be, one of those options that somebody can, on, with their own volition, sort of create that pathway for them to get into the U.S.
Yes.
Um, and so many times, people, families are reaching out, and they want a sort of an all-in-one solution, not just for themselves but for their families.
Yes.
And the E2 visa is exactly, what that is.
Hmm.
Um, Now, the E2 visa, just to give a little bit of background, it is not intended for everyone around the globe. There are certain countries that it applies to. We see this a lot for, in particular, for Canadians and Western Europeans, as Australians, and it really comes down to three main parameters that we need to look to. The first is that the individual is looking at setting up a business, or by the time they reach out to us, they may have already set up a business in the
Hmm.
U.S.
Yep.
Um, the investment has to have been made, or the investment has to be imminent. And what I mean by that is sometimes an individual is looking at purchasing a business, for example, and when going down that channel, they may consider, well, is it too risky to actually buy a business outright without having a visa in hand? So what we've been doing a lot of is actually having individuals, perhaps apply for the visa contingent, or sorry, purchase a business contingent on getting the E2 itself. Right. So that's one parameter, that the investment has to be made, or again, that it's imminent. The investment also has to be at risk, and that's closely in line with the investment having to be made. So you
Hmm.
can't merely say, "Oh, look at my account. I have all this money that I want to invest into this business. Apply for the visa based on that." No, it's those funds, just merely showing those funds, would be considered as not at risk funds, and
Right.
therefore that application may fail. And the third main parameter is that the business itself is not marginal. And what we mean by that is the E2 business is not meant to just be a benefit for yourselves to escape lockdown, cold weather, whatever it may be. It really is to benefit the U.S. And that's the sort of the mindset that a potential entrepreneur looking at setting up an e-business, e-visa business would have to consider. So if you are going to be involved in the type of business that's going to be hopefully hiring people, hiring Americans, hiring permanent residents, and not just hiring yourself and that's it, then that is likely going to be the type of business that the US is looking for,
Yeah,
right?
agreed.
Now, um, some of what we've been seeing as of late is because of the pandemic, there has been some real slowdowns and actually booking the appointments at the various consulates, particularly at the U.S. consulate in Toronto.
Hmm.
So we're seeing a backlog that's sometimes 6, 7 months, even longer. And what we've been doing as a result is if we have a client that has been in the U.S. already, right, and they've perhaps found a business that they want to purchase, what we've been recommending is for that individual to perhaps apply for E-2 status while in the US, but at the same time, don't forget about not forgetting about the E-2 visa, right? So what that's doing is it's allowing the individual to be physically in the US. They can apply for an E-2 status, which, by the way, you can apply for E-2 status with something called premium processing.
Hmm.
And with that being with premium processing, we can now we can get a result on the e-visa within 15 business days,
It's
right?
amazing, really.
So yeah, so I would actually recommend, again, if an individual is in the US, to supplement the e-visa application, which may be taking several months through the consulate, and applying for the E-2 status. And again, probably I would not be recommending to apply for an E-2 status standalone, just
Right.
because the E-2 status is only valid while the individual is in the U.S. And this is a mistake that many people have made, where they apply for an E-2 status and then they end up, leaving the U.S. for any reason, and then they're surprised when they try returning and only to find out, oh, that E2 status was only valid while I'm in the US. So keep that in mind. Again, the E2 visa supplemented with an E2 status where appropriate. I think that is one sure way to kind of get around this backlog that we're seeing at various consulates. And by the way, speaking of backlogs, um, I've talked to many individuals, and I don't know about you, Lauren, but they're almost hesitant to move forward with this just because they heard of the backlog through the consulate. But to me, that's a little bit counterintuitive, right?
Hmm.
Because what many of these consulates are doing is, they have to accept the application. They review the application, and then they reach out to indicate that now you can book an appointment if
Interview,
one's
right.
available for your
Hmm.
client. But if the application is not submitted, then that
They're
backlog is
not.
just growing and growing,
Exactly.
right?
You're not in the
So
queue. You're not in the queue. Like not buying a lottery
exactly,
ticket. We all remember
it's
those commercials for Lotto 649, right? When the guy was going
right,
down the escalator and he didn't have the lottery ticket and he was upset he didn't win. Remember those commercials from when we were younger? That
right.
gotta get in the queue, babe.
First in, first out is
That's
is the
right.
way is the way it's going to be. So, um, I mean, I'm going to field questions as well, I'm sure, afterwards. But Lauren, I think you can add some color to this.
Yeah, it's definitely been a flurry of activity in the past several months, particularly, I think, really starting in February when Toronto put the next lockdown, and then Calgary had a lockdown, and Vancouver had a quasi lockdown. And it's really lent to the level of activity that I know we've both been seeing. Um, I, they started calling me the Canadian whisperer because I am Canadian and I'm American and I'm here in Florida, and of course Florida is a very popular destination, especially for Torontonians. They love coming to Florida for the winter, and this winter they were challenged in that. Although I did see a few Canadians down here and still do, but not like ever before. I mean, usually there's a ton of snowbirds, and this
Mhm.
year that wasn't the case. But we do, besides just migration from other countries, we're even just seeing migration from within the US to get out of the cities and into, more space, and because people are working from home. So life has definitely changed. And for Canadians, I think that there was always interest, but I think that they are now ready to take action. Either they're fed up, or their business was shut down, or they just want options. And options require action. And Canadians by nature are conservative, and we tend to stand back and wait and wait and wait and wait. But now people are starting to be like, okay, I don't want to deal with another winter like this. I don't, so they want to get the process going. And Fadi is right. The backlog at the consulate is bad. However, Fadi, a colleague of mine who I work with, had an appointment scheduled from last year. It was scheduled for August, and he just moved it up. It's actually next week, June 10th. So things are starting to move, and you just have to stay on top of it. But again, like Fadi said, if we don't start and get you in the queue, you've got nothing to stay on top of because there's no application pending. So a lot of people are doing the change of status in the US, and it does give you that premium processing, and it gives you status. And then as you're in status, you're applying for the full-on E-2. And as long as you process that within 2 years, you're good to go, and you can't travel. I'm not sure about cruises, because cruises don't necessarily count as going out of the country, but I'm not sure. So we'd have to check into that.
Maybe stick to Hawaii.
Yeah, Hawaii, and Puerto Rico.
Puerto Rico, yeah.
Right, exactly. Not such bad places, but so yeah, there's definitely a lot of activity from real estate investors. As Fadi knows, my signature is how to immigrate through real estate. That was our last webinar. And definitely there's more interest in the US real estate market, especially as the Toronto market is out of control, and other markets in Canada are as well. They're all out of control. Here it's out of control in South Florida, but there's still opportunities, and you can use those opportunities to pave a path to the E-2. So if you're thinking about it, stop thinking and set up an appointment with us so that we can discuss your next steps. Because if you keep thinking, you're going to be thinking right through the end of the year and going on to 2022, and it's so much better. Another thing, Fadi, that probably we could talk about is the E-2 does not require you to actually live in the US. You don't have a residency requirement. So for people that are thinking about having options, it's a great option because it buys you freedom and flexibility to go back and forth and not, have a US social
security. That's a very good point.
Yeah.
So I've actually, this question normally comes up quite frequently. The question is, when I get my E-2 approved, when do I have to move to the US?
Yeah.
And the answer is you don't have to.
You don't.
Right? So you can, it is a good sort of visa to have just in case.
Like an insurance policy.
Right. Right. And from the past, even though the borders, for example, were closed, except for essential travelers, having an E-2 business in the U.S. and having an E-2 visa, well, that qualifies for essential travel, right?
Yeah.
I didn't have anybody that ran into problems going to the U.S. having already an E-2 visa.
That's right. 100%. And L1 was different. They were having issues because they had when Trump was in power through the beginning of COVID. L1s and H1s they stopped processing them, and they had issues, and they were challenging them. I had one client, he was in France, and they didn't want to let him in. We had to go through a lot of stuff. But the E-2, even though it's not a right, it's still a privilege, because every visa is a privilege. Even when you have your green card, it's not a right. You don't have a right to be here until you're a citizen.
Right.
But the E-2 is a very in my book, I call it the coveted visa, because I think it's the best visa to have. And anybody that can have the option of having an E-2 should. The only downside, and I just posted an article on Facebook from Forbes from a couple of days ago, I don't know if you know about it, Fadi, that they're talking, again, for the millionth time, about having a path from the E-2 to a green card. Because the only downside of an E-2, if you want to become a US resident, is that it does not lead to a green card directly. You'd have to do an EB-1C or find another avenue or increase your investment or something like that. Right. And I mean, there's options, but it just is not an easy path. And they're trying to simplify that. There's a huge lobby from immigration attorneys all over North America pushing for this. So we'll see what happens. Maybe, who knows, maybe under Biden's administration, something will come of it. I don't know.
Right. And it's interesting, even for those that have perhaps businesses, in their home countries and are looking at possibly applying for an E-2, many times those individuals look first to an L-1. And the way, depending, I guess, on the nationality that where you're coming from and how long the visa is actually good for, there are many nationalities where the E2 is actually valid for up to 5 years, right? And when you compare that to an L1, right? So if somebody was starting a brand new L1, well, that L1 would be good for 1 year initially in startup mode, and then it can be renewed, from within the U.S. in 2-year increments.
Mhm.
So you're essentially, if you come from a country where you can get the visa for 5 years, you're doing one E2 visa for three L1 visas, if you think about it,
That's right.
right? And likewise, if somebody already had a business in their home country and were able to apply for an E2, as you mentioned, Lauren, that doesn't preclude the individual from applying for an EB1C, right?
Mhm.
And the EB1C, for those that don't know, it is a intercompany transfer. It's an intercompany transfer showing that the individual is, working in a senior managerial or executive capacity in their home country, and they're being transferred permanently to the U.S. Division, whether that's an affiliate, could be a subsidiary, and you know yeah, a person can technically be on an E2 and still qualify for an EB1C,
Yep.
and we've done that for many people as
For
well.
many people.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Exactly.
absolutely. Yeah.
Just as a side note, just I know I brought it up initially, talking about the E2 being a good option for an entire family, and just wanted to touch on that a little bit further. The so the E2 principal would be tied to working for that E2 business. Now, the spouse of the E2 principal can get an E2 dependent visa. And
Mhm.
with the E2 dependent visa, that would allow for the spouse to actually apply for an EAD, which is an employment authorization document. So that
Mhm.
can, with an employment authorization document, that individual can work for that company. They can work part-time at Starbucks. They can, go to school. They
Do
can,
whatever they want.
set up their own business. They can work a
Yep.
couple part-time jobs, a few different jobs,
They
whatever it
can't
may
be
be.
an independent contractor. That's the only thing they can't do. And they can't work like as a realtor buying and selling homes, but they could have real estate license and work for somebody. They have to be an employee in order to be able to use that EAD until you have green card status.
Children likewise can also, they can go to school, and children are included as dependents until the age of 21, right? So
Mhm.
hopefully by then, things have been sorted out, and maybe the children will get student visa, maybe already the application has been made for a green card. So that is, that's just something to note about family members.
Yeah, I mean, the truth is that I have some clients, or we have some clients that they decide which spouse will own the business based on which spouse is going to be the most, like, have the highest salary. Like, let's say that one spouse is a doctor, and so then the doctor could get a position and make a good salary, and the other spouse could own the business, and maybe the doctor eventually goes over.
Mhm.
So it's all about figuring out the best strategy. And I think that that's the beauty of working with us together as a team, because I'm a lawyer, but my focus is on the business strategy of getting the visa. Fadi's focus is on the immigration strategy of getting the visa. So together we have that all-in-one solution that the E2 offers. And a lot of um, law firms, unfortunately, don't understand the business side of immigration law. So the E2 doesn't, let's say, specifically open as many doors. Like, for example, talking about that you don't have to move to the US. Most lawyers won't even discuss that with you because it's just not something that resonates with them. And it's a beautiful thing. And maybe because I'm from Canada, and a lot of my clients, because of the usual outside of COVID, back and forth because people are usually going back and forth, visiting their properties, visiting their family, going to school. It's a, it's an easy border generally outside of COVID to navigate. And
Mhm.
this makes it that much easier because you can build your US credit, you can have a US bank account, you can, invest in the US, you can run a business, you can earn income. All of these things are open to you as an E2 visa holder.
Right.
So it's a beautiful thing.
Right. Very good, Lauren. We actually do have some questions, so maybe we can field some of those.
Yep.
Okay, how can someone apply for permanent resident? Not sure if that's asked in relation to the E2. I did touch on that. Obviously, everyone's situation is a little bit different, but for permanent residency, if we're looking at this from a 30,000 foot view, it's going to be applied for through a family pathway, employment pathway, or investment. I would recommend, if you wanted some more one-on-one information, to actually book a consultation. We can get into more details there. Second question is, again, not related to E2s. How can nurses get a visa to the US? So it's probably a good idea to book an appointment based on this as well. For the most part, you do need a job offer. For Canadian nurses, it's a much more seamless process because a Canadian can apply for something called a TN, which stands for Trade NAFTA, although now NAFTA has been superseded by the USMCA. But the
MCA, define that, please.
Yeah, but going in under the TN is a very good option for a Canadian or
Nurse,
technically for a Mexican
yeah, right.
national. For
Going to
anyone else,
Canada, which they still want to do after
right,
lockdown.
right, exactly. All right.
I answered
What
one of the questions about Bangladesh, and Bangladesh is an E2 country, so you could do the visa and you can work with us on that because you are eligible.
what
Um,
was the question, Lauren?
what to do? Is there visa available for somebody from Bangladesh to move to the US?
Hmm.
So, and then there's a couple of questions which is common about Indian nationals. So Indian nationals are going to have a much easier time getting into Canada unless you have a business in India, and then we could potentially do an L1. But Indian nationals are challenging, unfortunately or fortunately. Or if you wanted to buy citizenship in Grenada
Exactly.
or Turkey or Moldova or even Panama, which is
Right.
my favorite one these days. I don't know if you've ever done that, but nobody even focuses on Panama, and there's great investment opportunities there. To get citizenship in Panama through investment, you can then have a springboard to use the E2 to immigrate to the US.
Right. And that
For,
is exactly, I was going to mention that in terms of getting, there are some countries where you can get citizenship in a matter of months. And if you're able to go through those channels and get that, then yeah, you can springboard into applying for an E2 because an E2 is not based on country of birth, but it's based on it is based on your country of citizenship. So
yeah, and you can have multiple citizenships.
right,
It's funny because you would never have thought 5 years ago that having Israeli citizenship would actually be an advantage to coming into the US because 5 years ago, Israel did not have an E2. And in 2018, I think the Israeli E2 was ratified. And so that made a big difference. So I actually have now a couple of clients that are pursuing an E2 that are they're from South Africa, but they have Israeli citizenship. And a lot of people like Brazilians have Italian citizenship or Polish
that's right.
citizenship. Venezuelans have Spanish citizenship, and you can go back and get that citizenship from your ancestry, and then you can qualify. Because as Fadi said, it's not based on birth; it's based on citizenship.
Right. What's the most recommended visa for a foreigner that has a business in the U.S.?
This one every
Yeah.
day.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So exactly, if you qualify for the E2, this would likely be it. Um, if you don't and you have a business in your home country, the L1 might be something
Mhm.
to look into.
See this one, Fadi? I'm from the Philippines, which is a good one. How can I apply for a visitor's visa? Oh, visitor's visa to the US, Vicky, or a visitor's visa to Canada? I'm assuming the US.
Yeah. So that's something you probably want to book an appointment for.
Right.
We are talking about the E-2, during this podcast, so, or this live event. Okay. I do have another one. I have another question. What is the process for an E-2 visa? Do you want to
Ah,
take that one, Lauren?
sure.
Okay.
The process for an E-2 visa. Well, there's many steps in the process. Oh, see, I'll talk American if it's okay. So I am here in Florida, and when I first got here, they used to make fun of me for saying sorry and process and project, and so now I don't. And then when I come home and I say, "Where's the restroom?" They're like, "The what?" They don't even know what I'm talking about. Anyway,
Right.
so the process for an E-2 visa, there are I have an 8-step process basically. The first step is you identify, well, actually, let's backtrack. Let's figure out if you qualify for an E-2. That's the most important step, because if you don't qualify, then we have to skip all the rest of the steps and move to plan B, which is another visa. So if you're from a treaty country like Canada or Bangladesh, then you qualify. How much do you have to invest is going to be super important. If you have 50,000 to invest, you're probably not going to want to pursue this, because you're going to be have a marginal business most likely, and your investment is going to be hard to prove as substantial. Not to say it's impossible, but I won't take a case on personally as the business side that's under 75,000, and these are all US dollars, not Canadian, not any other currency, okay? The next step is you figure out the business. So we look at your background and we figure out, are you a real estate investor? Do you want to be a real estate investor? Do you have a business? What is your business? What's your background? Your resume should have some correlation to what you're doing. Do you want a franchise? I love franchises. Franchises, the good thing is that they vet you while you vet them. So there's a match, okay? And it's like dating. You go through this franchise process, and as Fadi mentioned, a lot of businesses have a contingency agreement that's available for E2 applicants. If you're buying an existing business, it's going to be challenging to make that offer on a business that's contingent on getting your visa, because they just want to sell the business. They don't want to wait. So
Right.
when you're dealing with a franchise, they're more used to the process of the E2, and so they have special contingency agreements. I'm dealing with one right now with a property management company. So that's that. Then after you find the business, we have to make sure that the business makes sense. We start making the investment in the business. You do a deposit depending on what you're buying, and then you start working on the business plan. Well, you have at the same time you start working on the business plan at the same time that you retain counsel. So you're going to retain Visa Place, and we're going to start working on your business plan. At the same time, you're also going to speak with, and don't underscore, I can't underscore this enough, a cross-border tax advisor, whatever the border is, whether it's water, whether it's land. If you don't speak with a tax advisor, don't do anything, because you're going to mess yourself up. So you want to speak with a cross-border tax advisor, and then after that advisor tells you, okay, you're staying in Canada, you're going to remain a resident or not, here's what you need to do, here's the structure, then we have to set up your corporate structure. So then you make the investment, you're doing the business plan, you have Fadi on retainer, and we start the process. We build the business plan with his guidance and oversight, and then he starts the application process to prepare the petition. And the petition and do the source of funds, which is really, really important, that source of funds that people forget. They think, oh, I got a gift from my dad. Really? Well, where'd that come from? And the source of funds is a sticking point, because you have to show where the money came from, even if it was a gift. Now, if it was inheritance, you don't have to show the whole path, but the source of the money that you're investing is of critical importance. Okay? In this whole process, we also have to talk about, do you eventually want a green card? Because if that is your goal, we may need to look at things a little differently and have a business that can either be expandable or that complements your Canadian business or something along those lines. That's pretty much how it goes. Oh, and one
Very
more
good.
thing. The really, really important part is you get your visa, right? It doesn't stop there. that's when it begins. And how many clients do we have, Fadi, that think it stops there? And then they come to us 4.5 years later and say, oh, it's time to renew. What have
Right.
you done? Well, I'm in a completely different business now. No.
Yeah, of course. You gotta be on top of that. If there's any material changes, we would want to know as
Please.
legal counsel, of course. All right, pretty good. I have a good question here. Can I use a home office for an E-2 visa, or do I have to rent office space? And yeah, it's a good question. It comes up quite often,
All
and
the time.
my
Especially
answer
now.
is it depends,
It
right?
depends.
And what does it
Good
depend
lawyer
on?
answer.
Yeah.
Yay.
So it depends on really what's the nature of the business. So if you're involved in a business where, um, you know, let's say it's a pool cleaning company, right? You don't necessarily need to go and get commercial space to say, well, I need to get this commercial space just for the mere purpose of this application. Hey, if someone can, they have a couple vans out there, a few whatever it may be, and they're showing that there's a substantial investment in and of itself,
Yeah.
you don't need commercial space for that necessarily. But if you are in a business where it is quite usual to have commercial space, and and keep in mind, like even if you're working out of a home office, keep in mind the marginality part of this equation. So if it's not a marginal business, you're going to be hiring people. Are you going to have
Mhm.
people coming through your home and working out of your home? Could be the case, but just bear in mind the
Liability.
nature of the business.
Yeah. Just be careful, and whatever you do, don't decide on your own. Okay,
It's good.
use us
Good
because
advice.
that's what we're here for. And sometimes it's as simple as just getting a small, 10 by 10 office in a virtual office, like a Regis space or something like that, just so that you can have some substantiality to actually running it as a business. Now, chances are things have changed, and I haven't seen a lot of adjudication on this because all of my clients do have rented offices so far. But I think that the pandemic story could complement the the fact that people don't really need an office anymore. I mean, I don't have an office,
Right.
so that could add to the story. It's at the end of the day, I think it's all about the story and the business plan and how you tell that story and how you tell the story, and is reflected in the petition, because it all has to be consistent. Any inconsistency, you're done. You have to have a team that knows, like, if you're going to buy real estate, don't work with a realtor that doesn't know about how that will lead to a visa. Okay, because I'm a lawyer and a realtor, and part of the reason is because I'm guiding people on this in the whole process. If you're buying a business, don't go and buy a business without speaking with counsel or my team to figure out, how does this business fit into the E2? Is it going to qualify? Because you don't want to make an offer on a business and then suddenly be stuck with something that's not even going to get you what you want.
Right. Very good advice, Lauren. We have a specific
Yeah.
question here on purchasing or establishing a small grocery business
Mhm.
with about $75,000 in an investment. Are we allowed to get legal status? I don't see a problem with that.
Me
You
neither.
know, you're gonna have a grocery business. It's gonna be, so here are we checking off the boxes? Is there a substantial investment? Yeah, I'd say we can work with that. 75,000. Is the investment at risk? Well, that depends on how far along the process you've gotten. And is a business marginal? Well, I expect that a grocery business is going to be hiring people, and you're not going to run a grocery business on your own. So I'd say it probably makes sense from an E2 perspective. And I would uh, I would recommend that if you want to talk about this further, talk about your situation further, to give us a call, and maybe we can talk about this offline,
Yep.
just to see all make sure all aspects sort of check out. All right, and that. I think that is the last question. By the way, Lauren, there has been some people asking how to contact you as well. For myself, if you do want to book an appointment, you can go online, visaplace.com. You can also give our office a call. If you go on, again, visaplace.com has all the phone numbers on there. Lauren, do you want to provide
Yeah, so I'm
your
putting
details?
in a couple of things here. I'll put in the link to my calendar to set up a time to speak. And also this last item I'm putting is my virtual business card. Okay.
Do you want also maybe just in case someone doesn't have access to what you're writing, maybe you can say
Yeah.
it.
Okay, absolutely. My virtual business card, it's really easy to find. It's easy, ezcard.com. See, I caught myself. ezcard.com /Lauren ESQ, LAURENESQ. Also, you can find my podcast. It's called Investing Across Borders, and it's on all of the main podcast channels, Spotify, Apple, Google, and everything. And you can always find me there. And one of my websites is laurenesq.com. So you can find me at any of those places. And I'd be more than happy to set up a consult and figure out strategies so that we can get you the results that you want.
Okay, very good. Well, it was a pleasure doing this again with you, Lauren, and I'm sure we'll have more to come later on. So just stay tuned. And again, if you wanted to contact either Lauren or myself, you have the various ways to do so, and we look forward to working with some of you.
Thank you, Fadi, for inviting me today. When are you guys off lockdown now? July 1st? Is that what they're saying?
July 1st was yesterday.
No, July.
July 1st. Sorry, sorry. Yes.
I know.
No, no, no.
Thank you
No,
very much.
I didn't actually hear the latest. I
Oh,
think there's going to be an update today, but we are in Toronto. They are, it's going to be I think a slow rollout to resuming sort of regular life. So,
yeah, definitely. Well, I wish everybody well.
how are things in Florida?
Ah, you don't want to know. I mean, the truth is that unfortunately, Florida opened a little too soon and too fast. But most of us have been vaccinated if we wish to be. But not everybody is handling this all that smartly, let's say. Um, and it's definitely still super challenging for the kids. And but I'm grateful to be here, and at least it's summer, and you get to go outside, and things are going to get better there. So I want to come home. That's my home. That's where I'm from, and I
Mhm.
haven't been home in 18 months. Not that I'm counting, but I need to see my
Right.
family. I had a bar mitzvah and a bat mitzvah that I missed because where they were
Oh, wow.
Zoom. Yeah. So
Right.
anyway, it's all going to be good, and we're better off. I mean, in India, the numbers are staggering. So we're very fortunate. At least we're in civilized first world countries where we have good medicine. And I just wish everybody well. And hopefully we'll do this again probably in a month or
Definitely.
two. And
Okay.
here to answer any questions that you guys have. So thank you again. Take care,
Very
Fadi.
good.
Have a good
All right.
day.
Thank you. All right. You as
Ciao,
well.
ciao.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.